Okay, just making sure that that recording stopped. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Nice to have you here. Welcome to the MS-102 Microsoft 365 Administrator course. We're going to be digging into this particular course here in just a bit, but there are some housekeeping things that we need to go through first. So let me share out my screen and I will get started. Okay, so first off, welcome to our course. MS-102, Microsoft 365 Administrator. Before I start the recording here in a bit, there's a few things I'm going to go through, and then you'll hear the same little intro in just a little while, okay? But thanks for joining me. My name is Gene McKelvey. Been a Microsoft certified trainer for, we're heading towards 3 decades now. So I've been doing this for a little while. Yep, NT4, DOS 3.1, 95, 98. I go way back. But I specialize in things like Microsoft 365, the Azure platform, System Center products, Exchange Teams, SharePoint, right? So I do a whole bunch of things. Security is a big thing that I work with as well. So yeah, that's definitely going to be that's a thing I really enjoy working with. So I've been doing Microsoft stuff for 31, 32 years, something like that, but a trainer for the last 27 or so. So, yep. Okay. So just some housekeeping things. Now you'll note the session is going to be recorded. Participant data will not be in the recording. So in just a little while, you'll see the recording get started here. Note that there is a Q&A section. We're going to encourage you to use that particular section during the meeting today. And note that your FAQs are going to be based on the questions that you ask. So feel free to use that Q&A section. And things such as the lab info, which you see there in the chat, will also be in the Q&A section for you to be able to see. Note that your FAQs are going to be pinned daily and they will not be re-answered in the chat. Okay, so make sure that you take a look at the Q&A section. So you'll see that there in Teams. Take a look at Q&A. You'll find a spot there for you to ask your questions and then get those responses. The lab info, as you can see there in the chat window with the key, is listed. And so that particular key you used just today. So I would encourage you, click the link, click on, grab that key, and as you get into the Cert Week or cloudweeks.learnondemand.net website, you're going to register with a key code. That code is only for the first time that you register. You don't need to maintain it. You don't need to keep it moving forward. That code is only for your initial registration. After today, or even later on today, if you were to close out your lab environment, when you reopen it, you'll sign in. Okay, so you'll have that as an option, is to sign in. So make sure you get yourself signed in, and then you can start taking the labs. You should be able to see that info there after you register with that key code. Okay, so just a reminder, key code is only for today. That key code is only for today or on your initial registration. Also, we have a resource hub, right? So these team sessions are going to be in that resource hub. So you'll see those day by day. So you go in there and take a look at that. An achievement code is going to be in there. The survey or the eval for the class will be in there. And even a voucher for the exam is going to be in there. Okay. However, that's going to depend on you checking in daily. And so one of the things that you'll see is the check-in phrase. Okay, and so for this course, it's going to be admin core, ADMINCORE, lowercase, and that will be your check-in phrase. So join us every day this week, then you'll be able to have that passphrase or have that exam voucher at your disposal. Okay. On Friday, I will spend some time discussing what goes into the exam, some things you'll want to watch out for. Also during today, there will be some things I'm going to encourage you to jot down so that you can spend a little extra time on them. And then when you go in and you take the exam, you'll feel way more comfortable with these little points that I'll point out to you as well. Okay. So once again, thanks for joining us, and be sure that you get into the resource hub. You'll see that there's a section in there for the courseware for this class. Make sure you sign up on the Microsoft Learn website. Okay, I can't encourage that enough, because that's where, instead of a certificate, you're going to get all these achievements and trophies and badges and stuff like that in that Microsoft Learn profile. And then that's where your certificate of attendance will be as well for this particular course, and how you'll go about registering for the exam. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do at this point, because we got a lot of stuff to get through today, this is going to be like just a huge brain jam of information. So I'm going to flip to the next slide. I'm going to start the recording, or I'll have the recording started. There are two of us here, so my cohort and I will be handling this particular course today. And give me one quick second, and I will. There we go. Oh. Yeah, I will do that. Okay, so I'll give a little intro. You'll see the intro slide. I'll start the, we'll have the recording started. I'll give the intro, see the slide, and then we'll get cracking. Okay. Note that all your questions, please post into the Q&A section. And note that some of your information is maybe posted inside of that chat, or may already be answered inside of the Q&A. Okay, here we go, folks. Thank you so much. And let me get the next page going. And if we can get the recording started, please. And I'll turn off my camera. Okay, well, welcome everyone. This course. So let's begin. First off, what do our next few days look like? Well, we've got quite an agenda in front of us. You'll notice that we'll talk about the Microsoft 365 tenant, your experience in working with Microsoft 365, how to create a tenant, configuring some org settings, security, privacy, information, managing users, licenses, mail contacts, creating and managing users in Entra, including external users, creating and managing contacts, managing groups, creating and managing groups and shared mailboxes. We'll talk purview, we'll talk permissions, we'll talk roles, we'll even talk service health. Okay, this first slide that you see here is going to be today's agenda. And we'll throw a little 5-minute break in here as well, okay? Next one, tomorrow, we're going to dig into implementing identity synchronization. So what we talk about there is using the Microsoft Entra Connect tools, and then getting your environment ready to go, some tools to help with making sure you have a nice clean synchronization. We'll then dig into managing identity and access in Microsoft 365, discussing the zero trust security model, managing secure user access, SSPR, talking about Defender and the Defender XDR suite of tools, and then even a little discussion on responding and reviewing incidents and alerts that are generated by Defender XDR, what Secure Score is and why that's important. We'll also dig into managing your security services in Defender XDR. We'll talk about XDR, email protection, threat policies and rules, enhancing your email protection using Microsoft Defender for Office 365. And then using the Defender for Office 365 environment for investigating and responding to email and collaboration threats. Day 2 will end with implementing threat protection by using Defender XDR. You can tell there's a lot of focus on Defender XDR. And so we'll look at the threat intelligence features, reviewing and responding to issues and threats using threat intelligence. We'll talk about the different types of reports and logs that are available, cloud app discovery and how to get that configured, reviewing and responding to issues that are part of the cloud app discovery. Day 3, we're going to dig into governance in Microsoft 365. So this is where we start discussing Microsoft Purview. So Purview being for your data. And so we'll discuss the data governance solutions, retention, the policies, labels, and all that fun stuff. Then we'll dig into compliance. Once again, more Purview. So we'll talk about compliance in Microsoft 365. DLP, or data loss prevention, in Microsoft Purview. Then we'll also talk about DLP policies and how those can be implemented for Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. Day 3 will end with managing compliance, data classification, sensitive information types, sensitivity labels, and policies as well. Day 4, oh, look how tiny. So we're going to just basically talk about a lot of things on day 4 that have to do with the Microsoft environment, Microsoft 365. We'll talk some Copilot as well, and Copilot Studio. And then day 5, we're going to be talking about the certification stuff, right? So I'll give you some tips and tricks and things like that that you'll want to keep in mind when it comes to working with the exam. Okay. All right, so let's talk today. Let's talk today. So what are we doing? Well, we're going to get into configuring your Microsoft 365 tenant and what goes into that. Okay. And so we're going to talk about configuring your experience. And so things like creating a tenant and getting some other components configured are going to be a big piece of this. So let's take a look at this first one here. First thing, creating a tenant. Okay, so an organization wants to start working with Microsoft 365/Azure, and they'll need to have a tenant set up for them. Now, when you work with Microsoft on getting a tenant set up, you're going to end up with a domain name that they provide to you that ends with .onmicrosoft.com. Okay, so your company wants My Cool Company, right? My Cool Company is the name they register. It's now going to be at https://mycoolcompany.onmicrosoft.com. So that will be a tenant URL that's created for the organization. And so Microsoft Tenant primarily manages user identities and access across the Microsoft 365 suite of services. Okay, so when you do set up a tenant, that's where your identities, that's where your users show up, that's where groups show up, and all that fun stuff, and you can manage all of them there. Some Microsoft 365 plans, like EMS E5, don't create a Microsoft tenant for you, okay? So because it's an add-on for the Microsoft 365 E5 environment. Okay, so make sure as you're preparing for the exam, one of the things I'm going to ask you to focus on is licensing. Spend some time with licensing. Okay, spend some time with licensing. Licensing is always a challenging thing, but spend time with licensing. Okay, so take a look at the different plans Microsoft has, see which ones have what things. Yep, that list is going to be very, very long. However, look at the high level stuff and see what's included in each one, including look at E3, E5, the new E7 that just came out as well. Who knows, you may be tested on that, but also the add-ons too, and the different licenses that you can get. An organization can have multiple tenants. So Microsoft sets up each tenant with a separate Azure or 365 subscription. You can also have multiple tenants in the same subscription if you wanted to. But those different tenants could be reasons like we've got a variety of different locations that need to be autonomous. They function on their own. Or perhaps we're going to completely segregate our dev environment from our production environment or something like that. So organizations may have a variety of different reasons why they would want to set up different tenants and different subscriptions. Note that when you do subscribe to a Microsoft 365 plan, the number of licenses you purchase for the plan are typically based on the number of users or seats you need for the organization. Number of users or seats you need for the organization. Okay, so when purchasing licensing, just keep that little point in mind. Okay. Okay. Now, managing your tenant subscriptions. So maintaining minimum subscription requirements for your company is essential to remaining functional, right? Your licensing, doesn't matter who the vendor is, licensing is always a challenge, right? And so looking at the licensing for Microsoft products, you need to make sure you have the licenses to cover the products that are being purchased or that are being used by the organization. And so where can you go? Well, if you're in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center at admin.microsoft.com, you can always go in, look under billing, and see the licenses you purchased. So all the information about an organization's existing subscriptions, billing, payment information is all underneath that particular part of the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So you'll notice billing section, underneath that, your products, the licenses, bills and payments, billing accounts, payment methods, and billing notifications. Note that purchasing additional licenses can change the monthly billing date as well. Okay. So just keep that point in mind that there could be modifications. And then additional actions that can be performed from the licenses page, maybe adding a partner of record, somebody that's going to be helping you out, or a partner that's going to be working in conjunction with you. Perhaps adding another subscription, and even converting a subscription from one type to another can all be part of what can be done there, right? So as was mentioned, please make sure you study the licensing. Please make sure that you study licensing and subscriptions, okay? Note, purchasing an insufficient number of licenses can result in implementation delays, okay? So you got, 700 users, but you purchase 650 licenses, then you may have 50 people that are just sitting around not doing anything. So make sure you got the right number of licenses for the number of seats that are going to be required. Also, Microsoft does allow for integration of Microsoft 365 with other customer engagement applications. Okay, so couple of different mechanisms to integrate with your customer apps. One of them is the purchase services. So let's say that you want to, buy some licensing for Exchange or Intune or something like that. Well, sure enough, purchase services is something that can be done. And so then you could make a modification to your subscription or something like that. You could add on certain licenses. Note that licenses can be mixed and matched. So keep that little point in mind as you're working with your your licensing. Okay. And then you may need to assign additional licenses for those add-ons. They're all under the purchase services page under billing. Note that some subscriptions do give you a 30-day trial before the add-on expires and has to be paid for before it is enabled. Okay. Or re-enabled. So your 30 days may be up, and then you may need to re-enable it by actually purchasing it. The product comparison page will show you a detailed comparison of the features as well as the capabilities of the products that you do select. So you've got the purchase services. You can do that through the Microsoft 365 portal. You can also go into Azure through the Azure portal and the marketplace there. Okay, and so in there, administrators can control the third-party apps that their users can deploy and purchase. That is huge. That helps to keep rogue apps from being downloaded or added to the organization. So administrators can control that and then make those apps available to users. Azure Marketplace has thousands of industry-leading apps available to all Azure users. And the Azure Marketplace is not just Microsoft tools or Microsoft software, Microsoft apps. There's a ton of third-party in there. And so when you go and you take a look, you're going to see lots and lots of software that can integrate with the Entra ID environment. Because Entra ID is the backbone of the Microsoft 365 users and groups, right? So those apps tie right into Entra. Those apps then are going to be made available for, or can be made available for those users. Note that private Azure Marketplace enables admins to govern which products are available to their users, and Microsoft apps are automatically added to private Azure Marketplace. Okay, so yeah, an organization can actually customize and put together their own custom Azure Marketplace, because hey, not everybody's going to need every piece of software that's out there or app that's out there. However, we may need certain apps to be deployed or made available for users to be able to work with. Okay, so making those apps available in the marketplace is a great way to control what apps are currently being used in the organization. Okay. All right. Now we've got this cool feature known as Unified Audit Logging. Unified Audit Logging allows you to track and record user and admin activities across the various services and apps that are part of that Microsoft environment, that Microsoft ecosystem. And so this, because everything's unified in one spot, this allows you to monitor and investigate security incidents, compliance violations, operational issues. You can run queries against that data. You could feed it all into Purview to see what sorts of policies that are being ignored or administrator activity that's going on, right? That unified audit logging is a really awesome tool. Please add that to your list of things that you want to spend time with in preparation for the exam. Unified audit logging, okay? Note you can also generate audit reports and alerts based on specific events or criteria, and that particular audit log does capture a wide range of activities like application administration activities for apps registered in Entra, Defender for identity activities, and other sorts of custom searches. So when you do turn on auditing in Purview, then user and admin activity from your organization is recorded into that log, retained for 6 months, 180 days. Okay, so almost 6 months. Right? So yeah, the unified audit logging, and the purpose of it is for auditing. And so organizations that do implement audit logging need to consider that there are going to be a number of tasks that will enhance their audit experience. One thing that I've noticed with organizations is when they do enable some sort of logging or auditing capabilities, many times they don't go back and look at it, right? It's turned on, it's running, and it's logging information, but nobody looks at it. So what do we need to do? Well, once that audit logging has been enabled, then make sure that there is a audit log retention policy. So when auditing is enabled, audit logs can fill up super quick. How long do we need that data? Well, a retention policy should be in place to help answer that particular question. You'll also note create audit alerts and reports, right? So as things are happening and stuff like anomalies begin to occur, we want to make sure that we are aware of those anomalies and that we can take the appropriate action on them. And so the alerts are going to be big, and regularly reviewing the reports is going to be big. Okay. Last one that's listed here is search and export the audit log. Search and export the audit logs. Okay. So the logs don't do any good unless somebody's taking a look at them, right? So just be sure that you do take the time to spend a few minutes with those audit logs from time to time. One of the things that you have to do when you first get your organization set up with a subscription with Microsoft and the Microsoft 365 environment is your organization profile. This is what's going to uniquely identify your organization with the Microsoft 365 services. This includes being able to modify themes, logos, colors, sign-in screen information, right? So there's a number of things that can be customized for your organization. And so org profile will also include the organization's name, the address, phone number, technical contact, the domain name that's going to be used as well. Note that the address and phone number are for billing and support, and only GA or global admins can edit the organization profile in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Okay, so that profile should be put together, makes billing easier, also can make it so that you've got one common set of admins. Now note, the country or region where your organization is headquartered will determine things like which services are available, taxes, billing currency, location of the data center that Microsoft will use for your particular services. Okay, so as you're getting things registered, if you're a big, large worldwide organization, this is stuff you have to plan for, right? Note that you can't change your subscriptions country or region after creation. So you create the new subscription, and boom, oops, that was actually not the country. That's one of our branch offices. Guess what you're going to need to do? You need to sign up for a new account, choose the desired country or region, and get yourself a new subscription. Okay. So yeah, you can work with Microsoft support on that if you need to, but those are some things you'll need to do in order to get everything put together. And so make sure you set it up correctly the first time. The theme is going to consist of things like a background image, logo, set of colors that are applied to the sign-in page and the header of your Microsoft 365 apps and services. Okay. So although you'll still be able to tell that it's a Microsoft service in many cases, you'll actually be able to tell what organization you're working with, right? Note that there is a default theme that's going to apply to all organization users, but you can add on other custom themes as well. Okay. So those custom themes will, let's say that your organization has some subsidiaries, right? So although your users may sign in to the Microsoft 365 environment, you've got a collection of these different themes. Depending on what environment they sign into, they may have a different theme associated with them. Okay. So let's talk about usage of the Microsoft 365 environment. How do we make sure that we've got people to use it? We're going to talk about users. We'll discuss licenses. We'll also discuss mail contacts in Microsoft 365. So one of the first things we need to think about is what user identity model are we going to use? Okay, so a lot of organizations today are we've got an on-premises Active Directory domain services environment, and we're utilizing Microsoft 365. So we're synchronizing our accounts from on-prem to the Microsoft 365 environment. Okay, and that happens very frequently anymore, right? A lot of organizations are in that hybrid sort of environment. Organizations that are going like cloud first, or that they are cloud ready, may just do cloud identities, right? A lot of your smaller companies, or even a new company just spinning up, they don't have any hardware infrastructure. Everybody works from home, yet they've got access to all the services and features and resources that they need because they built all their infrastructure in the cloud, and that includes their identities. So they didn't need to stand up a domain controller anywhere in order to log users in, right? They're utilizing Microsoft 365 cloud identities, meaning that their accounts are held in the Entra ID environment. So it's a cloud identity. It's not synchronized. It is local in the cloud. That middle one that's listed here is what I just mentioned a moment ago, where a lot of organizations have an on-prem Active Directory domain services environment, and then they'll use tools like the Active Directory, or I'm sorry, the Entra ID Connect tools, and synchronize their on-prem directory with the Microsoft 365 environment, right? So that will be taking those on-prem identities and synchronizing them with Entra. And so In that case, you'll notice between 0 and 3 additional on-prem servers, depending on the number of users and also the configuration that you use. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit later about synchronization and how Microsoft has basically like a 0 server configuration for this synchronization to occur as well. But what that'll do is allow for you to specify what users or collections of users we're going to synchronize out to the cloud. Okay, so it could synchronize the user, and also you notice it says password sync. It's actually not technically the password. It's the password hash that gets synced out. Password hash. Okay, so for organizations that get kind of fearful about passwords being synced out to the cloud, no worries, right? The passwords that your users are using on-prem get hashed out, and the hash then gets sent to the cloud. That last one that's here on the list is Microsoft 365 federated identity. Federated identity. So what does that mean? Well, that means that basically your on-prem Active Directory domain services environment is the authoritative source for all logins, including with the cloud. So basically, when a user has to access a resource that's held in let's say the Microsoft 365 environment, they actually first get redirected to this federation environment to get authenticated with the on-prem Active Directory environment before finally getting their token and all that fun stuff to show that they in fact were logged in, and now they can log into the resources, because the on-prem environment, the ADFS or the federated environment, is a trusted environment. Note, between 2 and 8 on-prem servers and networking configuration, depending on the sign-in availability requirements. So a federated environment can be a very costly endeavor due to licensing and other sorts of things. Also having to either spin up virtual machines or purchase new hardware for that. Okay. But in this case, if a user does need to utilize a resource that's associated with the Entra environment, they'll be redirected on-prem first before being able to access any of those Microsoft 365 resources. So if you've ever had to stand up ADFS before, Active Directory Federation Services, which is another service that Microsoft offers for on-prem configurations typically, you'll know that there's a lot of work involved in order to get trust relationships and policies put in place. But that's still a model that some organizations do follow. Now, what about your users? All right. Well, you do build out Entra users. And so a user account that's put in place is going to be an identity with metadata that's associated with it, right? So that identity typically is going to have a code that's associated with it, like a GUID or something like that. But then there's metadata that's added on top of it. So stuff like what the user principal name is, what the user's first name is, last name, their department, right? Is it a agent account? You'll start seeing that now in Entra, okay? And so when you get into the Entra environment, now you'll start seeing, if you look under Entra, under users, you're going to be able to see all the users that are either synchronized or that have been built in the cloud, right? Or if you were to choose a new user, you could hit the drop down and then choose to create a guest user as well. Another thing that I'm going to throw at you, okay, when it comes to these different types of users, like a guest user versus a cloud identity, spend some time studying the differences between them. Okay, spend some time studying the differences between them. All right, so because there can be some access differences and some capability differences between them. So understanding those is going to be very helpful for you for real world and also for the exam. You'll also note that there is a bulk operations option. Okay, so one of the things that you do have the capability of doing is getting a spreadsheet full of user information and then adding that into your environment. Okay. And so now you can take and upload all those user accounts into Entra, and boom, now you have all those cloud users. There is a specific layout to it. Okay. So that particular spreadsheet, if you're going to do a bulk operation with a spreadsheet, there's a specific layout to the columns. There's headers that are in there as well that you don't go in and rename. Even if you don't like the way it looks, just leave it. And then there's a sample row in there as well. Okay, so you can see some of the required data and how it looks in the sample information, which can be deleted when you're adding your own info. Some things you might note as you get in and you create a new identity or user is the fact that you've got lots and lots and lots of metadata to fill in, right? The more metadata that you fill in, the better opportunity you have for filtering and for taking advantage of some of the dynamic capabilities of your Entra and Microsoft 365 environments. Also, when you pop in and you start taking a look at users, you're going to note that, of course, this is being used for large organizations, but you're also going to see a section in there on school information. Yes, Entra is used by schools, including schools where there are minors. So you'll see details about minor information in there as well. Details that can be filled out for those users that are in that school. Okay. When you get in and you start taking a look at the different users that are available, you'll see the user type is listed here, and then whether or not they came from an on-prem, if they were synchronized from on-prem. Okay. So if they are synchronized from on-prem, then that will show up as yes, meaning that the Microsoft Entra Connect tool was used for synchronizing that particular user account. Okay. All right, like I mentioned earlier, you can always use the admin center to build in users one at a time if you wanted to. So admin center could be great for doing one-offs, right? Hey, real quick, I just need to build a new user account. Great. Admin center could be a great way to do that. But if you start needing to work with multiple users, hundreds of users to do stuff with, right? Then you may want to use something like a spreadsheet to help you out with that. And so Microsoft will supply you the template in the user section of Entra. Okay. And so you can download that spreadsheet and then populate the spreadsheet with information. Note the spreadsheet does not contain every possible property. So when you take a look in there, there's some required properties, and then there's some additional commonly used properties in there, but it does not contain every single property. Okay. So just note that. So if you do have to import multiple users, using a spreadsheet can be an aid to you. Just make sure you get the template from the user section of the Entra tool in the Entra portal. You'll also note PowerShell can be used. Okay, so Microsoft has a lot of PowerShell tools that can help you with managing users, including creating user accounts. Okay, so when you go in and you start taking a look, you can utilize Copilot to help you out. You can ask Copilot, create for me a PowerShell script to start to create new users in Entra ID. Okay, and boom, a script will be created for you. Okay, so test it before you begin the process of doing that. But if you were to use something like PowerShell to help you out, that's a reusable tool. And so it could be used for automation or for quickly provisioning a new user. Also, directory synchronization. That's a really quick way to get accounts into our Entra environment. Okay. So you set up the Entra Connect tool, You can then start pulling those on-prem users from Active Directory domain services into the Azure/Microsoft 365 environment. Now, user account settings, managing those sorts of things. So to manage those user account settings, there may be several things like assigning an admin role. Okay, so as a Microsoft 365 administrator, yep, you've got a lot of power to do stuff. No, you don't have time to do it all. So having a team to work with always comes in handy. And one of the things that will need to be considered is what administrative role can we put somebody into? Okay, so there are a variety of different administrator roles in the Entra environment. And so if someone is added to an administrative role in Entra, that means that they have tenant level management capabilities. Okay, so have to think long and hard about that, but what we can do is start thinking about those individuals that can fit into those roles and understanding the different roles. One thing I'm going to encourage you to do is when you get into your labs a bit later, start taking a look at the different roles that are in Entra. You're going to spend some time in Entra in this particular lab and in this environment. So spend some time reviewing the different administrative roles that are part of a tenant, and that'll give you a good idea of what sorts of things are available for your organization as a whole. Okay. Setting users sign-in status is something that can be done. Specifying user location settings, right? Location settings are really ultra important as well. Okay. As well as assigning licenses to users. Hey, users can't use stuff unless they're licensed to use it. So that's part of what you do with managing those user accounts. And some very similar types of tools as this, right? You got PowerShell that you can take advantage of. You've got the admin center that can help you with assigning those licenses. And so note, you can use the Microsoft 365 admin center to edit either a single or multiple users. Okay. You can also use PowerShell to help you with administering a single or multiple users. Okay. So got a couple of tools in your pocket to help you out with managing users and their settings. Sometimes people get deleted, whether on purpose or on accident. So what do we do? Well, you can restore them if we accidentally threw them away. So we can recover them. Note that when a user leaves an organization, they usually don't need their account anymore, right? And so we don't need that data that's in that account to be accessible anymore. So what can we do? We delete them. That deleted user gets put into deleted users. Note that they're still part of the tenant. And so a recovery operation basically is just going to reactivate that user. So basically they are soft deleted. Note they have 30 days, 30 days, okay, to bring that user back online. So just a note, 30 days. Yes, they can be recovered, but only within that 30-day window. Okay. All right. And so you could find those users in the same spot as looking at the rest of the users. Okay. So then all you have to do is just take a look at the deleted users. So when you get in, you start looking at the user screens, make sure that you take a look and see if you could find the deleted users. Licensing. Okay, one of the basic tasks for an admin is to manage users and their licenses. Okay. So a Microsoft 365 admin user, sure enough, or an admin user can manage the licenses for users. Users do need to have a license for Outlook, SharePoint, etc. Right? So making sure that they have them is definitely a big thing. And so note that when you assign a license to a user, the service is automatically set up for that user. Please note something though. depending on the service, yes, it will start to set it up. No, it does not necessarily mean it's available immediately. Okay, so for example, you assign somebody an Exchange license. It's going to take that service a few minutes to get a mailbox put together for that user. So just keep that little point in mind. Practical, real world stuff. Sure enough, they do need a license. The fact they get a license does not mean that they can start using it the second that you assign them the license. Okay, it may be a little while before it's ready. Only GA, global administrators, user management administrators can assign or remove licenses. Important for the exam. Okay, good thing to note. Those are going to be some things you'll want to take note of. Okay, those different roles. And so to assign a license, you can use the admin center, PowerShell. I have used PowerShell before to help me to administer licensing for organizations that may want specific capabilities and not other capabilities. So for example, we'd love the entire Microsoft 365 suite, but we don't want Yammer, right? So how do you get that configured? PowerShell works out really well for that, especially when you're looking at hundreds or thousands of users. You also have Microsoft Entra B2B, right? So the idea here, you'll notice somebody can be invited to join your corporate Entra ID, but they come from another directory, right? So that could be another Entra ID environment, but that could also mean from social media. You've probably seen that before. I know I've got it whenever I'm using DoorDash or something like that. I will use, sign in with my whatever account. You'll notice things like Facebook or LinkedIn or something like that can be used for sign-in capabilities. And so when somebody does sign in with that, it's a federated service. So actually federated services is part of working with the Entra environment. It's already built in. So it allows you to actually securely collaborate with external partners. And so your partner users are invited in as guest users. So you get to remain in control of what they have access to and for how long, but your partner is the one that manages the account. Okay. And so you'll notice up here, okay, we've got this number 1 that's listed here. A company will send an invitation to a guest user, and then the guest user, will respond and set up an account. Okay. And then number 3, we can also choose to add MFA to those guest users for yet another layer of security. Note that there is a premium license that's required in order to allow for that. Okay. And then number 4, when the user is validated, then sure enough, they have access to the resources. That could be on-prem resources as well. But validation is also impacted by where the account is homed or where it originates to. So there may be some conditional access settings that do come into play also. So yeah, you can allow outsiders in to access your resources, okay? Whether partners or vendors or something else. Now we also have what are known as contacts. And so in Exchange Online organizations, your contacts are going to be mail-enabled objects that contain information about the people who exist outside the organization. Okay, so each contact is going to have an external email, and they are visible in the GAL, in the global address list. Okay, so they're pickable from that list. And so organizations can manage contacts in either the Exchange Admin Center or even in the Exchange Online PowerShell environment. Okay. But in order to manage contacts in Exchange Online, someone does need to be a recipient management, organization management, or mail recipient role. Okay, so if you need to create contacts, needs to be in one of those roles. Okay, good stuff to know for the exam. Now let's talk groups. Why do groups exist? Well, we need to put people or users into groups because we want to manage groups of users, not individual users. Okay, that could be a real challenge if we're wanting to get a group of people. Let's say we've got 100 people. Do you want to administer each one individually? Not at all. So we want to put them into a group and then configure access and permissions and stuff like that for that specific group. Your most common type of group is what's known as a security group. And so this will allow for you to manage access to shared resources for that group. Note that a group can contain other groups, right? These security groups can contain other groups. However, and I'm going to encourage you to do some digging on this, okay? The Microsoft 365 groups. Microsoft 365 groups are very, very unique. Yes, they can be used for permissions and things like that, but there's also other things built for them. Okay, so you'll notice for these groups, you can access a shared mailbox, a calendar, SharePoint, other things, and also can give access to external people, but unable to nest within groups. Okay, so you can't put a Microsoft 365 group into another group. However, when you build a Microsoft 365 group, there are other things that are built for them, like there can be a shared mailbox, like what's mentioned here. There can be a calendar. There could be a SharePoint site that's put together for them and things like that. Please, please, please do some reading, some research on when you create a Microsoft 365 group, what else gets created. And then some big differences between security groups and Microsoft 365 groups. So when getting in and actually starting to work with these different groups, there are some best practices to keep in mind. Number one, be sure to keep your group naming conventions simple, yet clear. Simple and clear, which means there should be a naming convention. Okay, I've been in some organizations where there's not, and the names are all over the place. So you should be able to tell just by looking at the name of the group what its purpose is, where it's targeting, etc. Also note the next one, create policies and procedures for ongoing group maintenance. People change job roles and stuff like that. Great. Do they still need the permissions from their previous job role? Probably not, right? So make sure that you have documented time schedules for maintaining those groups. Next one, add users to security groups and then add those security groups to the default groups rather than adding individual users to default groups. Okay, it's easier for you to control what goes on with a security group that you create. Okay, so let's say that we've got a, well, like a contributor or something like that. We may have a contributor group, but we may have a few different groups that fit into that default group. So put users into these security groups first before assigning them to default groups. Also, maintain a consistent, well-defined account provisioning process. Just because you have one person on the team that's really good at it does not mean that that should be the only person doing that particular job. What if that person leaves the company for one reason or another? What are we going to do now? Well, how did that person used to do it? Okay. So we need to make sure we've got documented, consistent, well-defined account provisioning process. This may also include mixing in things such as PowerShell scripts or other automation components to make these things happen. And note, assign at least 2 owners to a group so that one can help out when the other one's on vacation, right? And so when the other one is not available, when they're absent, somebody can still maintain the group. Number 2, an organization can't use the Microsoft 365 Admin Center to edit security groups if it is synchronized with on-prem Active Directory. Okay, so we're using the Entra ID Connect tool. That Entra ID Connect tool, we said, hey, we want to grab this group, and we want to have that synced out to the cloud. Management of that group takes place in Active Directory on-prem. Notice the third point. Microsoft 365 enables group nesting where you can add one group as a member of another group, okay? But it does limit it. You can't add groups of every type as members of all group types. So make sure as you're doing your prep, you understand the differences between them. Note the last one here, you can only restore Microsoft 365 groups once you delete them, right? So note, you can't restore any other group types once you delete them, but only Microsoft 365 groups can be restored if they were deleted. We also have this thing known as dynamic groups. Oh, they're so awesome. This is one of the big reasons why you want to fill in as much metadata as possible for your users, okay? Because you could build rules that say, hey, if this piece of metadata matches this value and this piece of metadata falls in this particular range, then they can belong to this group. So organizations can use rules to help determine group membership, okay? It could be, based on either user or device properties that are contained in Entra ID. And so Microsoft 365 does support dynamic membership for security groups as well as Microsoft 365 groups. Note that when an attribute changes for a user or a device, then the system examines all dynamic group rules in the organization for membership changes, and then either adds or removes the user or device if it meets the criteria for a specific group. Thus, the dynamic piece of this, okay? Note that there are certain rules that govern dynamic group membership. Number one, you can't manually add or remove a member of a dynamic group. It's no longer dynamic at that point. That is static entry. So we have to use the dynamic methods, right? You can create a dynamic group for devices or users, but not both, right? You can't create a rule that contains both users and devices. Number three, you can't create a device group based on the user attributes of the device owner. Okay, it's only going to be based on the rules on metadata of the device itself. And number four, device membership rules can only reference device attributes. Okay, so all that comes into play when working with dynamic group membership. How about shared mailboxes? Shared mailboxes. Well, good solution for groups of people that need to share a common email identity and a set of messages, right? So, for example, IT at or sales at whatever your organization is. So it's a generic email address, but it's a great way for teams to provide centralized services. So that shared mailbox doesn't have its own username and password like a user mailbox does. It doesn't require a Microsoft 365 license. And note, they're not supported on mobile devices. Instead, you need to use Outlook on the web in order to access them from a mobile device. However, it does allow for support for multiple users to monitor and reply to email addresses. Okay. So sure enough, shared mailbox can come in really handy. So someone can actually send an email, if they're part of that group, send an email for responding to sales messages or IT messages from that shared mailbox. Now let's think about naming for a minute. Group naming. So here's some good suggestions that are listed here. A group naming policy will enforce a consistent naming strategy for groups created by users, right? Group naming policy can be put in place. So Microsoft 365 will apply the policy to the group name and the group alias, but that naming policy can make it easier for people to identify its purpose, where it's supposed to be used, the function of the group, membership, geographic region, who created the group, and then policies can block words too, right? From using specific words in a group name. So you can actually add in a comma-separated list of blocked words if you wanted to, so that that word does not get used. Then organizations should consider these best practices, like using short strings as suffixes, right? Or use attributes with values associated with them. Notice, don't be too creative. Maximum length is 264 characters. Do you really want to have a group with 264 characters in it for its name? That's a lot of characters. And then last one there, upload your organization-specific block words list in order to restrict usage. Okay, so yes, you can put a policy, a group naming policy in place for your Microsoft 365 groups. In Exchange and in SharePoint, we can create groups too. Okay, so you can use the Exchange Admin Center in order to create distribution groups, security groups if you wanted to, dynamic distribution groups. Those are capabilities. You'll also note that for SharePoint, when you create a group in SharePoint and in a site collection, it's only usable in SharePoint. Okay, so security group you create in SharePoint only recognize it by that SharePoint site collection. Okay. And then note the last one here, you don't need to use security groups to be secure. Instead, you can always grant user permissions and access to sites individually. It's just groups make your job a whole lot easier, especially when you're dealing with large numbers of users. So just remember with SharePoint, anything you create in SharePoint stays in SharePoint, including with security. Okay. All right. Thus far, what have we considered? Well, we've considered the Microsoft 365 tenant. We've talked about what goes into a tenant, how to configure the experience, the fact you can put themes together, that you can register a domain for your tenant. Security and privacy settings. You can manage users, licenses, mail contacts. You've got a variety of different ways to do that as well. Okay. Creating and managing users in Entra, including external users. Creating and managing contacts in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, managing groups in Microsoft 365, and then creating and managing groups, including Microsoft 365 groups and shared mailboxes. Okay. And also groups in other services such as Exchange and SharePoint. So far in our first learning path, this is what we've covered. We are now going to take a 5-minute break, and let me get that going, and I will see you back here in 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you had a nice little break there. All right, well, let's keep on going, shall we? So we're going to talk now more about managing your tenant. We'll discuss managing permissions, roles, and role groups. Permissions, roles, and role groups. So you may have heard the phrase RBAC before, role-based access control. Role-based access control. And so in the case of RBAC, we have what are known as roles that we could take a look at. And so we're going to talk a bit about that. Your role-based access control is a great way to make sure that certain permission settings are enforced depending on the role of an individual. And so the Microsoft 365 permission model is based on the concept of roles, scopes, and assignments. Okay, so what's the idea behind the role? Well, that role is going to be that collection of permissions. Okay, so what is it that that particular role can do? So for example, if we have a global admin, well, that role can pretty much do anything, right? But if you have, let's say, a user administrator, well, now what that role can do is very specific to a certain type of tasks or functions. Note that there are a couple of different types of roles. We have one that's known as a built-in role, right? So global administrator, great example of a built-in role. These are ones that are created by and then also maintained by Microsoft. But then we have custom roles to think about, custom roles. And so a custom role is, let's say that we had a role that's in the Microsoft 365 environment, and we thought that it was really good, right? We liked it. However, the piece that we don't like is that it has this permission and that permission to it. So what can we do? Well, we can create a custom role based on a built-in role and then just remove those permissions. And now we have our own custom role. Or conversely, perhaps we like a role, but we'd like this particular role to also have a couple of extra things added to it, a couple of extra permissions or functions added to it. Take that role that built-in role that you really like, and then use it as the template for, or to create a template for your own custom role. Note this, however, custom roles must be maintained by you. What does that mean? Well, that means that if there's some new functionality that's added to the Microsoft 365 environment, that Microsoft may update other roles to help with permissions on that particular functionality, but your custom role, because it's your role, won't get touched. Okay, so just keep that little point in mind as you're working with the roles and your custom roles. So we've got the roles, collections of permissions, and then we have to determine where those collections of permissions need to be put, right? Where that role should be, where it should apply. So scopes are going to filter that or filters that limit the range or extent of a role. Where is it going to apply? And so you'll note that there are two different types of scopes. One of them is a directory scope and another one is a management scope. Okay, so that's going to determine where these particular roles will live. Some of your roles will show up when you look at the JSON behind them with a slash, meaning that you can pretty much put them anywhere. Some of them may be a bit more specific. Perhaps they apply to just a subscription or maybe a particular type of resource in the Microsoft 365 environment. But now you got your role. So this is the set of permissions. You've got your scope where you want to apply it, but how do you determine who is going to belong to it, right? Who is going to get those permissions? Well, now you have your assignments, okay? So assignments are links that connect roles and scopes to the users and groups, okay? And so you've got a couple of different types of assignments. So you've got a direct assignment. We're going to take the sales group and we're going to put them into this role, right? Or actually, let me use another one. We're going to take the HR IT admins and put them in this role. And we're going to take the IT admins and put them in a different role, right? That's a direct assignment. Indirect assignments can be other sorts of things like, you know, the groups that someone belongs to, or the dynamic capabilities, okay? So a couple different types of assignments there, different types of categories of roles as well. Main types of roles are going to be global ones, right? So these are ones that apply to the tenant as a whole. You also have service-specific roles, service-specific ones. And so your service-specific roles will, let's say, be like a VM contributor, right? So that's specific to virtual machines or the compute services. Feature-specific roles may be other types of roles that have to do with other components that are part of either Microsoft 365 or your Azure environments. And then they fall into a variety of different categories. Administrator roles, reader roles. In other words, they can't make any modifications to stuff, but they can see things. And even application roles. So an application can belong to these roles as well to have certain capabilities. So sure enough, Microsoft 365 works in conjunction with RBAC. And you configure RBAC through the Microsoft 365 environment. And also, you could do that if you're in Azure through IAM, Identity and Access Management. So there are Entra roles. Entra roles. And so these Microsoft Entra roles are going to be ones that impact the Entra environment. Okay, and they'll show up under your roles and administrators when you go into the Entra environment. All right, so your roles and administrators in the Entra environment are important. They have big scope, right? So they're not just tied to one resource group or to one type of resource, but this is a high level, okay? So it defines access to the Entra resources themselves, and note, they do not overlap with Azure roles by default. Okay, so these are specific to working with high-level stuff at the tenant level. And so the idea behind these Entra roles is it's intended to work with your IT admins, your app developers, and then folks that are utilizing other sorts of services that take advantage of the Entra environment, Microsoft 365, Office 365, Azure, Dynamics CRM Online subscribers. Okay? So you have these types of roles at your disposal. Then you have admin roles in Microsoft 365. Okay, what I'm going to encourage you to do, there are some default roles that you'll see when you pop into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. And when you look under a user, you're going to see a stack of roles. Okay, and note this kind of this table of commonly used Microsoft 365 Admin Center roles. Study these roles. Study these roles. Okay, what can the roles do? Because on the exam, they may say, hey, we're trying to keep the amount of permissions to a minimum that we give to people. And here's what we need somebody to do. Which of these roles will match the criteria of what we're looking for and only give them access to what they need, right? Following that principle of least privilege. So my suggestion is spend some time on these different roles. Okay. Like study them really, really well. Also, security guidelines for assigning roles. Note, only establish 2 to 4 global admins. That's a recommended practice. Some companies have tens or hundreds of them. So the more global admins you have, the more opportunity for mistake and issues. So try to keep the number of global admins to a minimum. Also, assign the least permissive role. Okay. Sure enough, you could grant everybody global admin and they could do what they need to do and then a whole lot more. Don't do that, right? Keep it restricted just to the role that's going to give them the capabilities of what they need. Last one here, make sure that MFA is enabled for your admins. For the most part, they are anyway, but just make sure that that's the case. The admins need to have MFA turned on. That added layer of protection because of how sensitive those particular accounts are. We want to make sure that they stay particularly safe. Now, some best practices when you're configuring these administrative roles. Number one is manage to least privilege. What does that mean? That means you give people what they need, only enough what they need, just to get the job done. Okay, so admins get exactly the permission that they need in order to do their job. And so why would I want to do something like that? Well, if you give people more, guess what? At some point, somebody is going to take advantage of having more access. And what that could lead to is some security nightmares. People being able to gain access to things or do things that they shouldn't have had the ability to do to begin with. And so now we're having to struggle with cleanup of a disaster rather than maintaining a nice, pristine environment. So try your best to manage to least privilege. Also note, number 2, use privileged identity management for just-in-time access. Just-in-time meaning that we grant access for only a specific period of time when the user makes the request. Okay, which is pretty cool. So if that's the case, and we've got a user that's doing something like that, right, then now it just keeps that window of time very small. And once the time frame expires, they no longer have that level of access. Okay. Note, turn on MFA for all admin accounts. I think that can pretty much go without saying the importance behind that. But note that users do have a 99.9% less likely chance of being compromised if they do use MFA, your multi-factor authentication. Number 4, configure recurring access reviews. Why? People change roles, people change jobs, people change departments, etc. Right? So organizations should regularly check to see if their administrators have just the permissions that they need, and then revoke any unneeded permissions over time. Number 5, limit the number of global admins to less than 5, right? So given the breadth of the capabilities of global admin, keep the attack surface low. Instead, put people into the roles that they require. Okay. Yep, global admin's the nice, easy one. Drop everybody in there, they can get to everything. Does all your administrators require access to everything? Yeah, maybe not. So if that's not the case, limit the number of global admins that you have. Number 6, use groups for intra-role assignments and then delegate the role assignment. Okay, so assign roles to groups instead of individual users. This makes life so much easier. If you've ever had to manage permissions or capabilities for users before, one at a time, and you have hundreds of users, yuck. So try to take advantage of groups. Put your users into groups and then assign those groups to those roles. And then number 7, use cloud native accounts for intra roles. Okay, so try to avoid using on-prem synced accounts for your role assignments, because compromised on-prem accounts can also compromise your intra resources. So that one there is a best practice. Yeah, so that's a good one to keep in mind there. Manage your roles across the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. Okay, so admins can maintain roles in different places. So depending on what it is, well, that's going to determine where they need to be set up. Okay. And so you can manage permissions centrally for all security and compliance related tasks in the following portals, right? So it does say manage permissions centrally for everything, but in a variety of different portals. So yes, they're all in the portal, right? But there are different portals. So if you were to go to the Microsoft 365 portal, you'll note that there are links on the left-hand side for other portals, for other services. So in your Microsoft 365 Admin Center, then you can configure things like your user and group management and Azure role-based access control. Also, service-specific permission management is part of this too, and application and app permissions. So some of your more foundational user group and app permissions, Microsoft 365 Admin Center can be a help to you. If you need to go beyond the basics and have to dig into things like conditional access policies, risk-based authentication, identity insights and monitoring, if you want to set up passwordless authentication, or if you're concerned about data residency and security, now you're going to have to take a step further and look in the Entra portal. Okay. So between those two, that tends to take care of most of the user and group stuff and reporting. If, however, we need to go a bit further for security, now you've got the Defender portal. Microsoft Defender portal. This is where you start looking at your threats and investigating threats. Incident management. Part of investigation of threats is also advanced hunting, right? So writing KQL statements to extract core information from key services in Azure and Microsoft 365. You have the threat analytics tools at your disposal. And also Defender portal allows for integration with other Microsoft security services. So you do have a holistic view of security across the org. Note that that tends to take place when you integrate with the other security services in the Defender environment. So when an organization starts looking at something like Defender XDR, okay, your extended defense and response, or this detection and response tools, right? Defender XDR is a great way to put all of your defense strategies in one toolbox, and then you've got all your reporting and your incidents in one spot. Another thing to take a look at is the Purview Compliance Portal. Purview Compliance Portal. So looking at protecting your data, right? So Purview helps you with your data protection. And so some key pieces would be like the compliance management features. How are we doing with adhering to either our corporate standards or our regulatory compliance standards? Okay. So you got compliance management, you have data protection you could take a look at as well. You have the means of working with risk assessments and insights. Right? So now you can start seeing what the types of risks are to your data and drill into how your data is being used. E-discovery, legal hold, right? So, hey, we've had an exploit. Looks like potentially our data did get exfiltrated, or a user maliciously stole data and is doing something with it. E-discovery, legal hold will assist you with that. You got your compliance reporting and auditing, collaboration and training capabilities as well, all through that Purview Compliance portal. So across the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, from Microsoft 365 itself to Entra and some of the advanced identity capabilities of working with Entra, to the Defender portal, right? And so security and threat management, and then for data, working with Purview. Okay. Good slide to note here in case on the exam you get prompted for which portal you need to use. Okay. So just a little bit of a role groups overview here for Microsoft security and compliance. Um, Depending on what area you're looking at, this is a great series of charts to help you to see which portal you'll need to take advantage of. If you're concerned about security operations, sure enough, you're going to look at Defender XDR, right? Defender XDR. And the purpose is for SOC access control. Okay? So being able to keep track of your security operations. And so some key capabilities that are part of this Defender XDR environment would be incidents and alerts. So incidents being things that have arisen security-wise that are of concern. Alerts, how we're responding to those. We've got advanced hunting to write queries that correlate data. And this can be very super in-depth. You even have endpoint and identity security. Those are key capabilities of your Defender XDR suite. Okay. And there's so much more to it as well, but those are the key ones that we're talking about right now. In regards to compliance and governance, right? So typically having to do with data and staying in compliance. You've got Purview. And so Purview then, its purpose is for compliance and data protection. Okay. So things like DLP or data loss prevention. Hey, if a number pattern looks like a social security number, we're going to tell a user, this is the social security number. You shouldn't be sending this out, right? Or reporting it, or whatever the case is. E-discovery for discovering content that maybe is published by a particular user and then locking it in place, turning it into records for a time, doing some holds on that data. You've got insider risk that you need to take, that you can take advantage of. Okay, so certain behaviors may look like a user is doing some things, like stealing data, exfiltrating data to send to a competitor. Okay. The last one that's listed here, if I need to administer my environment and I need to delegate that administration, I could take advantage of the Microsoft 365 portal. Okay. So this allows for me to delegate some of that admin access to others, like to take care of Exchange, make sure we stay in compliance, or that we've got our security all in check. Okay, so different admins for that. So good chart. This will help you if you're if you're going to take the test, you potentially get asked certain types of questions. This may be an aid to you. Now, assigning admin roles to users in Microsoft 365. So admin roles assign specific administrative functions to users. Okay, so note that each admin role maps to a business function and gives those permissions for those specific tasks in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Note that a user can be assigned to multiple admin roles since they're not mutually exclusive with one another. Okay? In fact, they can work together. And note that you can manage admin roles in the Admin Center or through PowerShell. Okay. So to assign those roles in Microsoft 365 Admin Center, you do need to be a GA, a global administrator. Okay. So you'll note, got your global administrator. Global administrator can do anything in any service that's part of Microsoft 365. However, if you're a Teams administrator, then what you can administer is Teams. That doesn't mean you can administer Exchange. Okay? It just means that you can take care of what's going on with Teams. And if you're a Teams admin, you can administer that service on the highest level, but it's just Teams, nothing else. Okay. So you've got these variety of different roles, and these aren't all of them. These is just a sample. Okay. But there are other administrator roles at your disposal. But once again, in order to assign somebody to those roles, GA, global admin, does need to be belong to the user that's going to be assigning those roles. And then GA could do any of these things that's listed here, plus other stuff. Note, if you don't have in-house admins, you can delegate your administration to a partner. Okay. So yes, if you need some help, you need a consultant or a company to take care of your environment, sure enough, that's a capability. Notice the warning. Carefully consider how much you trust that organization before you're delegating to someone else. See, when you delegate, they have the ability to specify administrative roles in your organization when they create users on your behalf. Okay? That's a lot of power. That is a lot of power. But notice that when you're defining these delegated administrators, you do have a couple of them, right? Two different roles, either for full administration, right? So extensive admin privileges like creating and managing user accounts, roles, permissions, security settings, purchasing services and licenses, exchange online settings and mail, and then even SharePoint sites and files, all that stuff being modifiable, full administration. Or limited administration, so restricted admin privileges. Note that you can manage user accounts that already exist, but you can't create them. You can reset passwords. You can manage group memberships, view and manage support tickets, but can't get to other more sensitive things. So look at that as more like a help desk type configuration, right? So perhaps your partner is a help desk partner. And so those could be some things that limited administration could come in pretty handy for that. Role groups in Microsoft 365. So these allow for organizations to assign roles to a group instead of directly to individuals, right? So easy administration or removal of users to a role. So put users in groups, assign groups to the roles. What's the benefit of a role group? Well, simplifies role administration, security, compliance. Note it gives users only the minimum permissions that they need, right? And it makes it so much easier for admins because they don't have 10 million little users sitting inside of a role that they need to take care of. Instead, they're just concerned about the groups that are part of that role. It increases productivity and collaboration as well. Okay? Going to be a little less downtime, little more activity. And so some best practices, use those built-in role groups whenever possible. And then if necessary, if it doesn't meet your specific needs, then start thinking about custom role groups. Last bullet point on here says to review regularly and update role groups. Okay? So just because somebody needed permission before does not mean they're still in a position to need the same permissions. To create your custom role groups, you could do that through Microsoft 365 Admin Center or through Entra. You'll also note you could do it through PowerShell. Okay, so yet another tool at your disposal. Some restrictions, however, you can't change a role group into a non-role group. Also can't turn an existing group into a role group. Okay. Only GAs and privileged role admins can create role groups. Okay. And note a group cannot be added as a member of a role group. So just a few things to keep in mind there. Role groups are a special type of group. What I would suggest to you, spend some time, feed it into Copilot, say, hey, what's the difference between a security group and a Microsoft a role group in Microsoft 365, right? And then see the output that comes back from that, because you may be tested on something like this for your exam. All right. Managing our tenant health and services in Microsoft 365. So because Microsoft manages the environment that your services will run under, including your Microsoft 365 services, you need to know how things are working, right? And because Microsoft has all these locations around the world, all these different regions they work with, there's a bunch of opportunity for things to have issues, service issues, outages, right? And so because of the tons of different services and the bunch of different locations, there's a variety of ways where a outage could occur or even a degradation in a service. So there's a service health page in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center that will allow you to see current health status of services. For example, if we're having a problem, maybe a sporadic issue with a service, it may be showing up as investigating, right? Perhaps there's been enough complaints come in, Microsoft's going to start evaluating it. Maybe there's a degradation, so performance-wise, there may be issues, or even a complete interruption. You may even note like a restoring of a service, or even an extended recovery, right? Perhaps taking longer than anticipated. So the service health page in Microsoft 365 will let you know the current state of services. And the Microsoft 365 Health Dashboard will show you any critical alerts, things that do require your attention, service health and usage, right? So the current service health status of your Microsoft 365 apps and services that are owned by the organization. So the example I used earlier, if an organization isn't using Yammer and there's a Yammer use outage, I don't care. That's not my problem, right? So depending on what services you're using, you'll be able to start seeing the those alerts that are specific to what your organization is taking advantage of. And lastly here, some recommended actions, what you can do to improve your organization's health. Maybe it's, hey, you need some MFA, or monthly updates for Office that needs to be turned on, or perhaps sharing some OneDrive training, right? So there's a few different recommended actions that are listed here. That's if that they apply to you and your organization. Tenant health. Okay, so tenant health, Microsoft usage analytics. So you've got this feature known as the Microsoft 365 adoption score. Microsoft 365 adoption score is there for you to see how many people or how well the features and the feature-rich set of the Microsoft tools in Microsoft 365 are actually being used. Okay, so you've got the adoption score, but then you can also look at the tenant health by you looking at the usage analytics. The cool part is the usage analytics can use Power BI if you have a Power BI license. So that means you can get some really rich data that you can drill into specific aspects of the data that's being returned. But the usage analytics will allow you to see usage data, create your own custom reports, share that insight throughout the company, and even gain insights into how specific regions or departments are using Microsoft 365. Hey, that happens sometimes. People like doing things the old way, right? Well, this is how we've always done it, and that's how they continue to do it, not using the new tools. Okay? So what you can do is take a look at the usage analytics and then potentially have some ideas as to how to improve that. Note that the data for the activity reports is can last either 7, 30, 90, or 180 days, depending on how you've got things configured. But if you're using Power BI, that data is available on a monthly basis for up to 12 months. Okay. So use that to kind of help you gauge, okay, which one of these am I going to take advantage of, and how long do I need to retain that data? So when looking at monitoring Microsoft 365 service health, you'll notice your different areas are listed here and different tools, what the purpose is, and then even any key capabilities. So when we start thinking about our Microsoft 365 environment, we may have to really consider, okay, so what is it that seems like it's struggling right now, or that I'm having problems with? Which one of these different tools am I going to take advantage of to give me the data that I need to see what I need to improve, or maybe where I need to alert my users that sure enough there's going to be an outage, right? So first thing we have here on the list is our service monitoring. Our service monitoring. Okay. And so the services themselves, well, Microsoft 365 Service Health helps you with that. That's going to tell you about the service availability and whether or not it's online or offline, if it's degraded, etc. Okay. So what are the key capabilities of working with the service monitoring aspect of service health? Well, you've got incidents and advisories, right? So that's going to tell you how things are coming along. Real-time status and even region-wise impact. That's super important too, because although you may see that a particular service is struggling, if you're not using, let's say, Australia, right, or one of the regions in Australia, yet that's where that particular service is in a degraded state, and you're using, let's use, for example, East US, well, that's not impacting you, right? So being aware of where these different issues are happening is going to be important to you. Also for issue management, right? So identifying and assessing your issues that you're having. Well, you've got a health dashboard that can assist with that. And so this is where you can start seeing the issue details, what the impact duration is, and notice even a root cause update. A root cause update. So it's one thing to put a Band-Aid on it, but Microsoft wants to try to drill down into the actual cause and fix the problem. And so a root cause update will allow for you to see what that root cause was if Microsoft has found it. And then for admin visibility, well, Microsoft 365 Admin Center is there for you. Okay. Microsoft 365 Admin Center. This is what's going to give you that centralized monitoring for service status, for historical health data. An administrator needs to see what's happening with their Microsoft 365 subscription. Great place to do that is through the Admin Center. Also, some other health notifications and best practices. Okay, well, you can go into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center and configure notifications. This will give you alerting capabilities, email alerts, message center notifications can come your way as well. So go in and configure notifications. It's going to be a big deal. One of the things you can do as well is if you need to do some more advanced notifications, you can always work with tools like in Azure, setting up the logic apps or alerting features through Azure Monitor. For configuration focus, right? Well, service health settings will be your scope. Maybe you only want to tweak things down to just relevant notifications only. You can actually get into service health settings, assign the admin recipients, and select the services that they're going to be alerted on. Do you think that your Exchange admin cares that there's a problem with SharePoint? I mean, maybe, but that's not in their scope. So why would they, right? So you can narrow down the alerts and the notifications to just ones that apply to certain individuals. Operational best practices. Operational best practices. You'll note all services. This helps to minimize business impact. So note, regularly review best practices. And best practices can come from Microsoft's tools, right? You can utilize Azure Advisor to help you with some things. You can also check the Microsoft website to see what some of the best practices are. Something else to note, communicate outages to people, okay? I love seeing those messages come through that right now the status is intermittent when dealing with SharePoint Online. Not that I like to see that message, but I like to see that it's communicated out to people. So instead of people sitting around getting frustrated and making all these calls to the help desk, boom, they're notified, hey, we're having problems with SharePoint right now, and that should be able to cut down the amount of confusion, frustration, etc., from our users. So communicating those outages definitely going to be a big deal. Last one here, track those post-incident reports. Yeah, that's going to be a big thing too, right? Keep track of them and see what the actual causes were, and if there are things on your end that were impacted, and how they were impacted by that outage or by that particular issue that came up. Okay? That may help next time you see that particular message. Hey, we have this outage in SharePoint again, and that did impact um, our communications out or something like that, right? So you can define what those reports are, what's contained in them, and how they impacted you and your organization. So far, what have we dug into? Whew. Well, learning path number 2 from today took us into managing our Microsoft 365 tenants. We talked about permissions, we talked about roles and role groups, and the fact that there are a variety of different types. And really, one of the things I'm going to stress to you, maybe feed it into Copilot, ask Copilot, what's the difference between a role and a role group? When would I use one over the other, right? Really get an understanding of those particular topics, because I remember those being addressed on exams. Implementing and managing roles in 365 and Entra. And remember that your Microsoft 365 environment is great for things like your users and your groups. But if you need to do some more advanced things like conditional access or run some reports or anything like that, you're going to have to dig into the Entra console for that. The cool part about it, though, is that as you're in the Microsoft 365 admin portal, you have on the left the ability to see all the other portals. And so you can just click on the one for Entra, and it takes you right into working with Entra. Role groups, Defender XDR, Purview, Microsoft 365 workloads. We talked about those. Tenant health and services, and also monitoring the health of Microsoft 365 services using Service Health, including configuration of notifications, and really the importance behind that. You'd prefer to hear it right from Microsoft first, as opposed to have 500 users telling you that there was a problem, right? So make sure those notifications do get configured. Now, look at this. Yeah, I got some homework to do. Lots and lots of homework. You've got a learning path on configuring the tenant, your Microsoft 365 experience, software updates, adoption and usage, right? So this is where it takes you into the adoption score, configuring and managing Microsoft 365 backup, users, licenses, mail contacts, managing and monitoring those Microsoft 365 licenses, including for groups, bulk user management, including in PowerShell, managing groups in 365, managing delegation by using administrative units. Please spend some time with the administrative units. Please spend some time with the administrative units, okay? Get an understanding of what those are. Then manage Microsoft Entra roles in Entra Privileged Identity Management. Add a custom domain in Microsoft 365. Configure client connectivity to Microsoft 365. That one's going to be important to take note of as well, because there's going to be certain DNS records and stuff they're going to suggest to you. Implement and manage domains. Configure and review network connectivity insights. Manage your tenant is another learning path. Deploying Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise. And analyze your Microsoft 365 workplace data using Microsoft Viva Insights. Apps for enterprise is going to be like deploying your Office on-prem, right? So having instead of web-based tool, having an actual app on the computer, program on the computer. Okay? Viva Insights is so cool. If you get a chance to spend some time with Viva, you'll hopefully you'll dig it as much as I do. And there are a lot of labs, okay? So get in there and start working with those labs. You'll get a chance to work with domains, users, groups, role groups, troubleshooting as well, and even doing installation of software, okay? So quite a bit of homework that's involved, but what you'll find is if you spend some time digging into this information, it can become easier for you, right? And it makes what we're talking about make more sense. Okay. So that is going to conclude today. This is the end of day 1 of the MD 102 course on Microsoft 365 administration. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow.